Russia just discovered 50 billion barrels of oil beneath an African nation the world never expected to hold a drop. But what is Russia doing here? In what nation did they find the oil? And how is it going to change anything for Africa? Let's find out. In the heart of the Sahel, where cracked earth stretches endlessly beneath a burning sun, you don't expect to strike oil. Burkina Faso wasn't supposed to be that kind of place. There were no legends of gushing wells, no offshore rigs, no powerful oil dynasties. It was known for its cotton, not crude. But in early 2025, beneath layers of sand and silence, a secret was pulled from the ground, an oil reserve so vast, it flipped every assumption about this country on its head. For decades, international companies bypassed Burkina Faso entirely. The big players, ExxonMobil, Shell, TotalEnergies, focused on established fields in Nigeria, Angola, Algeria. Burkina Faso? Too dry, too risky, too far from any port to matter. Exploration was minimal. Geopolitical instability scared investors. And yet, right under everyone's nose, a buried empire of oil lay untouched. So, how did Gazprom find what no one else even looked for? The answer begins years earlier, not in Burkina Faso, but in Moscow. As sanctions tightened around Russia, the Kremlin launched a quiet campaign to expand its global footprint. Not with tanks, but with tools, with engineers, with extractors. Africa became the new front, and energy was the weapon of choice. Gazprom, flush with state backing and political incentives, began exploring regions others had written off. For Russia, Burkina Faso was ideal. A country estranged from the West, a government willing to reject the IMF conditions, and crucially, a leadership desperate for alternatives. Traoré's military government welcomed the Russians not just as allies, but as partners in a new national vision. Geologists from Gazprom began mapping the northern regions of Burkina Faso in 2023, using advanced seismic imaging and satellite-guided deep surveys. Where Western companies saw barren land, Russian teams spotted anomalies, pockets of hydrocarbons buried beneath geological formations millions of years old. They drilled, quietly, cautiously. No press releases, no diplomatic fanfare, just dust, data, and drill bits. And then in the early days of 2025, the numbers came back. Not small finds, not testable volumes, but something massive. 50 billion barrels of crude. This wasn't just a discovery, it was a revelation. A nation known for exporting migrant labor now had the oil wealth to power entire regions. But the surprise wasn't just the volume, it was the quality. Preliminary assessments suggested the crude was light and sweet, the kind that refines easily into gasoline and commands high prices globally. It's a geological oddity. How did a landlocked country, far from tectonic collisions or ancient deltas, end up with a reserve that rivals entire Gulf states? Scientists speculate that during the late Paleozoic and Mesozoic eras, this region of West Africa was part of a vast inland sea, rich in organic matter, shielded from oxygen, and perfect for oil formation. Over millions of years, sediment built up, trapping hydrocarbons deep below the surface. The region's relative lack of seismic activity preserved these reservoirs in a kind of geological time capsule. But why was this never found before? Here's a reminder to please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black culture, history, civilization, and identity. Let's continue now. Because no one seriously looked, and the few who did lacked the deep scan tech Gazprom deployed. Western companies often dismissed Burkina Faso based on outdated data and the logistical nightmare of being landlocked. Getting oil out of the country would require massive infrastructure, pipelines, roads, refineries. But for Gazprom, this wasn't a problem. It was a long-term bet backed by Russian geopolitical ambition. Now, with confirmation underway and extraction plans in development, the implications are staggering. This single oil reserve, if harnessed properly, could generate over $3 trillion in long-term revenue at current prices. Even accounting for infrastructure costs, corruption risks, and market fluctuations, it would still rank as one of the most valuable oil finds of the 21st century. But here's what makes this story truly unpredictable. It's not being run by a consortium of Western investors or managed through familiar IMF frameworks. Instead, It's being orchestrated by a country under Western sanctions, in alliance with a military-led government that's torn up the old colonial rulebook and is now writing its own. In a world where energy equals influence, this discovery doesn't just fuel cars, it fuels power shifts, economic realignments, the collapse of Western dominance in parts of Africa. And yet, for all its magnitude, the oil hasn't flowed. Not yet. Burkina Faso's leaders promise the people that this wealth won't be stolen or sold to the highest bidder. They say this oil will be different, that it will build cities, not just bank accounts. But that kind of promise has been made before, in Venezuela, in Angola, in Iraq. So the real question isn't just how the oil got there. The real question is, who gets to control what comes out of the ground? Will Traoré give the wealth that belongs to locals to someone else? When the news broke about the 50 billion barrel oil discovery in Burkina Faso, the question in every Western embassy wasn't, is it real? It was, who's going to manage it? And the answer came not from a corporate press release or a diplomatic negotiation, but from a political reality that had been quietly reshaping the Sahel. France is out. Russia is in. To understand how this happened, you have to step back from the oil rigs and enter the halls of power. Because this story isn't just about who owns the oil fields, it's about who Burkina Faso trusts to guard them. Burkina Faso was once one of France's most reliable Francophone allies in West Africa, a cornerstone of what Paris liked to call its private backyard. French troops were stationed on Burkinabe soil. French firms were embedded in banking, telecom, and infrastructure. French diplomats had the president's ear, and for decades the arrangement seemed unshakable. But under the surface, something was festering. To many Burkinabe, France's presence began to feel less like protection and more like possession. The military interventions, first under Operation Serval, then Operation Barkhane, were increasingly viewed as ineffective. Islamist violence grew worse, not better. Corruption flourished. Western aid came with strings, and those strings often pulled Burkina Faso in directions that served Paris more than Ouagadougou. So when a young army captain named Ibrahim Traoré overthrew the civilian government in 2022, it wasn't just a coup. It was a break with everything France stood for, a symbolic and strategic rupture with the old world order. But Traoré didn't just burn bridges, he built new ones. Within months, diplomatic cables showed a new name rising fast in Ouagadougou: Russia. Not through official embassies or trade deals at first, but through backdoor security arrangements, private military advisors, and informal emissaries. Russia knew how to move in silence, and Traoré knew he needed a partner with no colonial baggage. The turning point came not in a speech, but in a sequence of decisions that left no room for ambiguity. First, the military government terminated its joint operations with French forces. Then it revoked diplomatic privileges for French NGOs and media outlets. Next came the expulsion of France's ambassador, who was accused of meddling in internal affairs, a rare and explosive diplomatic gesture. By the time France was forced to withdraw its final troops, it wasn't just a military retreat. It was a public eviction notice. France, once the dominant external power in Burkina Faso, had become persona non grata. In its place, Russia stepped forward, and fast. One of the first signs of Moscow's growing grip came when it reopened its embassy in Burkina Faso in late 2023, a move that hadn't happened in over 3 decades. But this was no routine consular reactivation. It was a signal. Russia was planting its flag. Simultaneously, military instructors arrived quietly, not in uniformed convoys but through cooperation missions. Local forces began receiving training, equipment, and strategic support. Russian language programs appeared in elite military academies. And behind closed doors, Gazprom began negotiations to secure exclusive exploration rights in the country's northern region. By the time the oil was confirmed, Russia was already inside the house. But why would Traoré trust Russia? The answer lies not in ideology, but in utility. France demanded reforms, elections, anti-corruption drives, all the trappings of democracy tied to its development aid. Russia offered something else entirely: respect for sovereignty, no matter who was in power. Where the West saw a military junta, the Kremlin saw a strongman ally. And Traoré, still consolidating power, needed a friend who wouldn't flinch at the word coup. But there was more than just political alignment. There was mutual benefit. Russia, under economic sanctions and energy market isolation, needed new frontiers, both for resource extraction and geopolitical messaging. Partnering with an oil-rich African state gave Moscow exactly that. It wasn't just about the barrels, it was about the symbol, a former French colony, now turning its back on the West and aligning itself with a sanctioned superpower. For Burkina Faso, this wasn't just diplomatic strategy, it was survival. With France gone, it faced growing insurgent threats and rising internal dissent. Russia's willingness to offer military assistance without lectures gave Traoré the breathing room he needed. And there's something else often overlooked: the people. Many Burkinabe citizens, especially in urban areas, had grown disillusioned with France long before the elites did. The perceived hypocrisy, fighting insurgent while propping up corrupt regimes, made France's role look less like liberation and more like legacy control. Russian involvement, by contrast, was sold as a clean slate: new friends, new terms, no patronizing. And when the oil news hit the headlines, it fit perfectly into this new narrative. The future of Burkina Faso would be decided in Ouagadougou and Moscow, not in Paris. But alliances aren't just made of sentiment. They are tested in moments of crisis and opportunity. And with the oil confirmed, a new test was approaching: how to use this wealth and who would get the first cut. Because now that the foundation was laid, the vision began to unfold. A vision of highways, refineries, cities rising from desert dust. For most countries, oil is the end goal. It's the money, the power, the thing everyone fights over. But in Burkina Faso, something different is happening. The oil discovery, those 50 billion barrels hidden beneath the Sahel, wasn't presented to the public as a jackpot or a miracle. It was announced as a beginning, a tool, a stepping stone. And what President Ibrahim Traoré and his administration are building on that stone is not just economic growth. It's an entirely new vision of what Burkina Faso can become. They're not calling it a petroleum state. They're calling it Africa's next transformation hub. And the blueprint they're following doesn't come from France or even from Russia. It comes from the East, specifically the desert cities of the United Arab Emirates. If you listen closely to the speeches coming out of Ouagadougou today, you'll hear a strange but deliberate echo of Dubai, a once obscure fishing village turned global empire of logistics, glass towers, trade zones, and tech parks, all powered, in its early days, by oil. Not sustained by it forever, but kick-started by it. That's the idea. Oil as a launch pad, not a leash. Behind the scenes, Burkina Faso is drawing up multi-decade infrastructure plans funded not just by oil profits, but by equity in the oil operation itself. Under the terms negotiated with Gazprom, the Burkinabe state is reportedly securing partial ownership of downstream facilities, including refineries, pipelines, and storage depots. A break from the usual model where African nations only receive royalties or rent while foreign firms take full control of the supply chain. It's not about shipping crude out of the country. It's about processing it at home, adding value, and exporting refined products, gasoline, diesel, jet fuel, not just to neighboring countries, but across the continent. Burkina Faso's Ministry of Energy has already outlined plans for 3 industrial corridors stretching across key regions: north to the Mali border, east to Niger, and south toward Ghana, all centered around energy hubs powered by the new oil wealth. These aren't just refineries. They include new urban zones with planned housing, education centers, and rail lines. Solar-fed industrial parks are designed to combine oil with renewable integration. Transport corridors are intended to transform landlocked status into a logistics advantage, connecting Burkina to regional markets that previously bypassed it. This is where the vision gets bold, and where most outside analysts begin to scoff. Because turning a country like Burkina Faso into a regional trade giant isn't just a question of resources. It's a question of stability, of governance, of time. But the leadership is unfazed. They're counting on people underestimating them. What Traoré is pitching isn't utopian. It's a strategic insurgency in the world of development models. He's openly rejecting the Western development through debt trap. No more waiting for IMF disbursements. No more begging for climate funding. If the West won't build a future with them, they'll fund it themselves. And they'll use their oil, their own hands, and their allies to do it. And it's not just about oil. In the past year, Burkina Faso has restructured its mining sector, renegotiated dozens of foreign contracts, and begun establishing national companies to handle everything from gold to grain logistics. The oil money is simply expected to fuel this broader diversification strategy, one that includes a state-run development bank designed to back local businesses, a tech incubation fund aimed at keeping young Burkinabe entrepreneurs from fleeing abroad, and the launch of Les Moulins du Sahel, a grain and food processing project that is already shipping local rice to neighboring countries, a quiet hint at future self-reliance. All of this is being wrapped in what Traoré's government calls a new model of African governance, one where resource wealth doesn't trickle, but circulates. To skeptics, these plans sound too ambitious. They ask, how can a country battling insurgents and political volatility become a regional economic hub in a decade? But what they miss is the psychological pivot underway. For the first time in generations, a Burkinabe leader isn't asking for pity or patience. He's asking the people to build. And oil is the down payment. The state is already setting up digital tracking systems for oil revenue, an effort to avoid the corruption traps seen in other African oil states. It's also piloting transparency dashboards, allowing citizens to track which communities receive infrastructure, how contracts are allocated, and how much of the national budget is funded through petroleum profits. If it works, and it's a big if, Burkina Faso won't just be pumping oil. It'll be pumping legitimacy into its institutions, pumping investment into its industries, and pumping purpose into a nation that's long been treated as disposable by global powers. The stakes are massive, the model is fragile, but the vision is clear. Burkina Faso doesn't want to be the next Nigeria. It wants to be the first version of itself. But every blueprint faces pressure, and as the plan accelerates, pressure is exactly what's coming. Not just from within, but from far beyond its borders. But nothing can stop Traoré now. Not foreign pressure, not hidden threats, not even the whispers of sabotage behind closed doors. He knows exactly what's at stake, and exactly who's watching. For years, Burkina Faso was treated like a pawn, a place to extract wealth while leaving its people in poverty. France took what it wanted. Contracts were signed without consent. Resources were moved out. And in return, broken promises, empty aid packages, and a cycle of dependency. But this time, it's different. Traoré isn't just leading a government. He's leading a correction of history. He wants every drop of oil, every ounce of wealth to benefit the people it belongs to. No more middlemen, no more colonial leftovers, no more development aid that chains the country deeper into debt. He's building something bold, a future where Burkinabe citizens own what's under their feet, and no challenge, no Western headline, no diplomatic backlash can slow him down. Because this fight isn't about politics anymore. It's about dignity, about legacy, and Traoré is making it clear. Burkina Faso's future will be decided by Burkinabe hands, and no one else. So will Traoré back down? How long will it take Burkina Faso to become what it is planning for? Let us know in the comments section. Can any external power stop its progress? Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If so, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We have decided to bring videos on something nobody talks about: the Black culture, civilization, history, and evidence about how glorious Blacks have been. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.